This event is co-sponsored by Barrett Bookstore. And if you'd like to buy the book, I know they have a few more copies left. I would like to mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by our annual Friends of the Library campaign. So we thank you for your support to make programs like this, as well as our collections, available to the community. Please be aware we're going to have a Q&A portion later in the evening. If you have any amazing questions, please feel free to write them in our Q&A section on the Zoom website. We may not have time to answer all of them, so please be aware of that. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to our dear friend, Alan Gray.
Thank you very much. Thank you first to the library for giving me the privilege to come back and speak at this now that I am a civilian and not related to the library. It's obviously fantastic for someone to be able to introduce their daughter at an event. And anything that I said about her would mean nothing because I am her father. I have read the book, the one I got from Barrett's, and loved it. But in our family, when your daughter is an author, it's don't ask, don't tell. I hear very, very little about what's going on in the process of writing and redrafting and things like that. And I watch what goes on at a distance, and I see some of the major milestones. But one of the really important things that I saw this time was how important the editing process is. It really goes deep into what the work is and how it will result. And that's why it's really fantastic that tonight we've got Kate Nintzel, who is the executive editor of Custom House, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. She's edited #1 New York Times #1 bestsellers, Booker Award nominees, and she's edited any number of books and authors that I'm sure you've read. So it's just fantastic that she's involved tonight, and I just want to turn it over to Kate and let her take it from here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dad.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be here tonight. It's been a very interesting 6 months in book publishing, as it has been everywhere. And my colleagues and I have been saying one of the real pleasures is that we're able to be on tour with our authors in a really present way, in a way that we haven't been when they've been on tour in cities all over the country. So that's been a real upside of this. I also almost never get to do the Q&As, so that's a real pleasure for me. And I am so excited to have Emily here tonight. I'm excited for us to talk about her book, and please, if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat, because you know, I have a lot to say, Emily has a lot to say, but the more the merrier, so don't be afraid to jump in. So let's get right to it. Emily?
Let's do it, Kate.
Let's do it. Okay, so for anyone who hasn't read the book, it just went on sale Tuesday. So it's possible that there are some people here who have not finished it or started it. Oh, I should also just say a big thank you to Barrett Bookstore for being our bookstore partner tonight, because we love our independence. So thanks, guys. So for anyone who hasn't read the book yet or started it, Emily, why don't you give us the overview? Tell us, what is The Talented Miss Farwell about?
I am so happy to. And first, I just have to say thank you to the Darien Library. I have been so lucky to be a part of the Darien Library family, literally, for a long time. And it's been really special to get to know everyone there through my dad. But as he'd be the first to say, you know, it's really about the people, the staff, the patrons, the community of the library, and they've always just really welcomed me and made me feel like it, you know, wasn't nepotism that I got invited to talk to you tonight. So thank you, Dad, for introducing me, and thanks to Darien Library. Thank you, Barrett's Bookstore. I love you. And Kate, I'm so psyched that we could be doing this together. It's awesome. So yes, so The Talented Miss Farwell is a novel about a female con artist. And this is a novel about a woman named Rebecca Farwell, who has 2 lives. She leads a double life. By day, she's Becky Farwell, a small Illinois town government employee. and who's a dedicated public servant, a single woman who lives a quiet life in the farmhouse she grew up in. She's a member of her church. She's beloved by her community. She's really devoted to her place. By night, however, she's known as Reba Farwell, Reba, who is one of the sort of top contemporary art collectors in the world. She becomes this global high society wheeling and dealing art collector. And the way she's been doing that is by embezzling money from her town to fund her art collection. So the novel takes place over 20 years as she begins this epic crime and sustains it and lives her double life, and how she struggles to pull that off. So that's what it's about.
So where did this idea come from? It's a pretty big idea.
It was so amazing to get this idea. I live in Chicago. I was driving along Lakeshore Drive. This is around 2012, 2013. And I heard this NPR story. I'm sure my kids were like babbling in the back seat, you know, in their car seats. And I heard this NPR story about a breaking news report about an arrest of a woman in a small Illinois town who had been indicted for embezzling $50 million over 20 years from her small town where she worked as a government employee. And the thing that grabbed me, I mean, that's pretty grab-worthy in and of itself, but the thing that made me think, oh my gosh, I might write about this, is that the reporter said that the FBI had held off arresting this woman for about 6 weeks, even after they knew she had done the crime, because, as they put it, they didn't believe that she could have pulled off this crime by herself, i.e. a woman could not have pulled off by herself what would turn out to be, and this is truth, the greatest municipal fraud in US history.
Wow.
They were essentially looking for her male conspirator, co-conspirator, her boss. So the weird thing was that as soon as I heard about this story, I stopped reading about it. I stopped listening to it. I stopped following any of the news. I had the germ of an idea. I really wanted to explore what it would be like to pull off a double life like that. And I wanted to kind of preserve my imaginative space to create a character who was entirely my own. So it comes from a true story, but it's very loosely inspired by it.
And Becky / Reba, I'm gonna call her Becky.
Yeah, Becky.
Because at heart, she's Becky.
Becky.
Yeah. She's so singular. She's the most, with her, I felt such a push-pull. I was rooting for her. I wanted her to get away with everything. There are moments in the book where she's about to get caught and, you know, she has to cash a check. Yeah. Or she has to change her clothes, or she, you know, there's like a real moment where she's about to get caught several times, and I was rooting for her. And yet there are other moments where the consequences of her crime are true. You know, her small town, the swimming pool is dry 3 years in a row because they don't have the money to fill and care for the swimming pool. The riverfront starts to crumble, and that is in large part because of the money that she's stealing. So how did you do it? Like, how did you live with this character for all the years you lived with her, and how did you make me, and I hope many other readers, both love and hate her at the same time?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I just got a text from my best friend who's reading the book, and she's on like page 90, and she wrote, "Is it bad that I'm kind of rooting for Becky?" And I think I was so happy to hear that, because as you say, I mean, I love Becky. I think that for me, she's not a criminal first and foremost. She's a person, and she starts small. There's an accident with some money that's found in an account, $500 that she uses to buy a painting, her first painting. And she's given this kind of obsession. It comes down to her. She doesn't ask to become obsessed with art. She's certainly in a place and a time without access to much art. It's not like she grows up in a big city. She becomes entranced and obsessed, And she doesn't ask for that. So in a way, it's almost a burden for her how much she wants something that she's not really able to have. And then I think what I really wanted to explore is like, can I walk the fine line as a writer between someone who's doing something that is bad and yet somehow rationalizes it and does stuff to sort of offset it? So I think you and I talked about this in the process of editing the book. I mean, Becky sometimes steals money from where she works, but she also truly loves her town, so she will put some money back in, right? She'll fund the Little League team. She will pay for the prom that the high schoolers, weren't going to have otherwise. And in a way, she does bring the town some things that they wouldn't have had, because when you're in the art world business, you can sell paintings and make a great profit. So a lot of that profit she does pump back into the town. And in a way that allows her to tell herself or to believe or to hang on to this kind of like sanity, like, oh, okay, I'm doing this. I'm helping these people, I'm helping my friends, my family, my neighbors,
How much do you think thinks she's a criminal?
I think she has a very complicated way of thinking about it. At one point I say in the book, someone might call that stealing, but Becky would never use that word in her own mind. Like even in her own mind, she has a certain way of setting up the way she lives. And for her, I think she just has this very kind of twisted, complicated way of rationalizing what she does. I don't think that she really believes that she's a criminal. She's terribly, desperately afraid of getting caught, that's for sure. But I think in a way, it doesn't really come home to her about, the damage she's doing.
Yeah. Because she's also giving so much, not only in the town of Pierson, giving so much back, but she's also, the bigger she gets in the art world, the more she's helping, she's supporting artists, she's giving them money to live on, she's discovering people and bringing their art to a new place. So there is this push-pull. Can you talk a little bit about the use of art? Because the crime that this was inspired by had nothing to do with art. The art
was... Right, absolutely. So yes, this was the first big change I made, and one of the reasons I stopped following the true news story. And in the real case of the actual person who did this crime, she put all of it into her horse breeding showing business. And so right away I was like, I'm not writing a horse novel. I'm not a horse girl. I'm a city girl. I don't do horses. So I right away knew that wasn't where it was at. But instantly I thought of the art world as a place that could be kind of where you can kind of play with big epic sums of money. I mean, I think everyone knows the value in the art market is kind of insane. Sometimes a painting is worth $20 million, and then other years it's worth, 500,000. It's this kind of giant inflated abstract market. And because Becky, as I created her, is this genius with numbers, she has a great gift of numbers and calculations and finances and business, which is how she's very different from me, by the way. I'm sure my parents are cracking up because I barely can help I had to stop helping my daughter with math when she was in like 4th grade. But I created Becky as somebody who, is this math savant. And so the art world was a natural fit for her because it is so much about giant sums of money and investment and appreciation and depreciation. I also think, I don't know what you think, Kate, but there's definitely something metaphorical about paintings and the art world, whether it's like, because it's so much about what's visible and what's disguised, whether it's so much about creation and myth making and sort of, reputation. It seemed like a great fit for a con artist.
Yeah. And the other thing that I really love about art and the way you use it in the book is that so much of art, like you're saying, so much of the value of the pieces that she's buying is inflated or created by buzz or created by, the right person says, I think this is worth X, and then it is, and that's part of what Becky ends up doing.
Yeah.
But Becky's ultimate appreciation for the art is entirely personal. The pieces she has, she keeps in her barn. No one knows she has them. She doesn't show them to anybody. No one can know, because how could she buy, it's a secret that she has them. And so I also think there's this push-pull between sort of like the public persona and the private appreciation. And for Becky, that everything comes back to, I think in some ways for me, she gets caught up in sort of the game of like purchasing and flipping, especially at the end when she starts to become a, what's it called? When she's collecting, a completist. When she's a completist and she's creating these sets that she has to complete. And so there's a game to that, right? There's like a strategy and a negotiation and a can I complete it and that sort of thing. But when she gets it at the end, it's entirely personal, and it's private.
It's private.
Yep. And so that for me is another part of the character that I think really you have done really well with, is that there is this push-pull.
I love that you mentioned the private part, because I remember once years ago, I have this sort of side interest in the art world. I definitely don't collect art, but I enjoy reading about it. I like to see gallery openings when I can. But I remember one time I was reading a magazine, it was probably something, kind of fancy schmancy, like Vanity Fair or something. And they had a feature on some wealthy, like uber wealthy person who had a private museum. And I was like, private museum? Like, what does that even mean? Isn't that a contradiction in terms? And the article was about how some wealthy people have their collections set up in separate buildings with sort of state-of-the-art, industry standard museum, to keep art, you have to have like humidity stuff and light stuff, but it's not open to the public. It's like just for them, that one person and maybe their party guests. And obviously that stuck in my mind because it becomes a big feature of what Becky does. And I think I was so kind of like half entranced and half really like upset by that idea of someone who can buy these works of art, right? Which really are meant to be seen, you would think, by people, and put them away in this private vault just for, a very few people's pleasure. But I was also like, wow, that's perfect for Becky. She doesn't care what other people think. I mean, she really doesn't. But for her, this art, as you say, is a very deep, private, personal obsession, and she lives that.
And then the other thing that I'll say about that is there's a moment at the end. I hope I'm not spoiling anything here, but the final piece that she needs to collect for her final collection is she has to find the person who will grant her the rights to, and that's like a big question. Like, can she track that person down? And when she does, that woman says, "You're just going to keep him down here in the basement?" And he says, "Yeah." And the woman says, "Great, stick him down there."
Right.
So like, there's also, again, it's not even, some of it's about the collector and some of it's about the people who were in the artist's life at the time and the power they have. And this woman, it's a complicated story about who she is related to the artist, but at the end of the day, it's her decision. Stick him down, stick him in the basement.
Yep, put him down here.
Yeah. We have a question from the chat, which I'm gonna ask, which is, Kate, what is it about Becky that grabbed you? And I will say exactly what we have been talking about. I mean, when I saw this book for the first time, it was different. There was a second storyline, there was a contemporary character. And to me, this novel was always about Becky, because it was this amazing, it was this catch me if you can story where this woman is living this very ordinary life. And then on the weekends, she's flying to Japan. And I think there was a scene that got cut that I sort of missed, truthfully, where she comes in on she comes in.
Oh yeah, I missed that one too.
Remember that? She comes in from somewhere and she has to get to the office for something. And she's wearing like one of those, like the cutout dresses that were, like the 90s
bandage dress. Yeah.
And someone catches her in the office. And she's obviously not dressed for Pierson. She's like obviously dressed to be like late night New York City or something.
Yeah.
And so it was that kind of push and pull that really grabbed me, that like, how can you live in these two worlds and how can you keep all those balls juggling?
Yes.
And that and it remains true to this day.
Yes. I mean, it's so funny when you mention, and my dad was mentioning the importance of the editor. I just have to say, like, there's that conventional wisdom out there about how editors don't edit anymore. Like, I'm sure you've heard that. And maybe people listening have heard that. But I'm here to say, like, it's totally not true, because not only did Kate, like, get my book instantly, but like, how many long conversations did we have about like the ins and outs of this story? And you're right. I wasn't ready to write the book just about Becky. I had this other character kind of introducing her or talking about Becky or helping us get to Becky's story. And you were like, okay, but no, this story is like Becky. And I think I was scared to write this kind of, Becky's so big and her life is so big and eventful.
And she's bad. I mean, she's got a lot of money from the people she lives with and purportedly cares about,
Yeah. I wasn't ready to go there, but then when you got me going, I felt this huge sense of relief, because suddenly the novel was like cleaner and stronger and faster, because it was about this epic life. And I think I had been scared to go there. And I'm so glad that you got me over that hump, because I mean, it definitely is a story of a very singular person.
Can I ask you, while we're talking about Becky, I mean, we'll be talking about Becky all night, but like specifically about Becky, the fact that she's a woman is important for the story. I mean, that the detail that grabbed you initially was that the FBI believed a woman couldn't have pulled this off by herself. But so what else, how else does that play into who she is, and either how she gets away with it, but also just character-wise?
Yeah, for me, like, her being a woman is absolutely central to her entire story. I mean, she starts out growing up pretty poor, or, like struggling with her father's agriculture tools business. And she's pretty genius at business, so she helps him turn around a failing business. But of course, that means that as a young teen, when she's helping him do this, that's a male world, right? And she is helping her dad and kind of making her own business career, starting in a place and a time in the early 80s where women weren't really, doing that. And her town is pretty conservative and pretty isolated, very rural. So she wasn't given a lot of models about women being leaders. Then when she joins her town government, again, she's the first female hire that they have in this department. She makes her way up to the top. And then even when she breaks into her sort of like criminal career, excuse me, in the art world, she is pretty rare to be a solo single woman alone, making those kinds of deals. So in a way, I hope that builds sympathy for her. In my mind, it's definitely like something that makes me want to cheer her on, because she faces so many obstacles in so many various male spaces. And Becky just won't let that stop her. She uses every sort of advantage and strategy that she can muster to make her way as a woman in a lot of times where she's the first person doing that.
Do you think she would have been caught earlier if she had been a man? I think of all the near misses in the novel. Do you think that sometimes she got away with things because people weren't looking closely enough?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think she occupies a place in her town that's like given to a beloved single woman, right? She's their sort of beloved savior a lot of the times, and her parents die early, so she grows up in town kind of embraced in that way that, I grew up in a small town that you do when that happens to a young person. I think as a woman, she's given a lot of passes maybe for stuff that maybe they didn't expect her to be doing, and I think that she's underestimated a ton. And she has these kind of crazy skills and gifts that aren't really able to be developed. So, I think she's sort of like a secret weapon that, the town doesn't really know they have.
Yeah. I'm going to pull another question from the chat, and this is a great question. can you talk about her relationship with her mentor, Mac, who deceives her, and then about how she does something similar later down the line?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And thank you for reading it that carefully and asking about that. This was one of the earliest ideas I had about the book, was that as Becky enters the art world that can be so cutthroat, how is she going to make her way? And she is going to have to learn the hard way. And so I knew instinctively that she was going to need someone to show her the ins and outs, right? She enters as somebody who is pretty gauche at first and doesn't know the lingo. And she has a lot of money to spend, but as with most sort of insular communities, you need to know who's who before you can get accepted. You can't just write the check. So she needs that social access, and she has to learn the hard way through her mentor, Mac, who's an older gay man who's very successful in the Chicago art world. And he sort of takes her under his wing, and they form this kind of beautiful friendship that's also a little bit fraught. He needs something from her, she needs something from him. And there's some painful stuff that happens that I don't want to give away, but you know, later on in her career, when she's more isolated and not needing someone to show her the ropes, she herself is put in the position of, you know, needing to put herself first, even at the cost of people who look up to her. And I think that, you know, to me, this was fun because I had never written a book that took place over so many years. So I wasn't able before to really develop that kind of sense of, you know how people come into your life and then sort of are out of your life at different times during your life. And so for me, that was like a really fun sort of up and down to track throughout the novel.
Becky does a lot of bad things,
Yeah.
but she also is a really good friend to one person in particular, to Ingrid.
Yes.
So Ingrid to me is the soul of the novel. They meet at a Judd's concert.
Yes.
Because Becky, remind me of the story. Becky, there's something, she bought a ticket, there's a guy.
They both get kind of fooled by the same sort of cheesy guy who comes onto both of them, and he wants to take both of them to the concert, but he ends up taking neither, so they both go, she and this other woman, Ingrid. And
they both pay for their tickets.
They both pay for their ticket because he's too cheap or something like that. So, yeah.
And over the whole course of the novel, whatever else Becky is doing, she is always giving back to Ingrid. You know, like Ingrid has, I don't want to say a tough life because not everything about her life is tough, but she does, you know, she gets married, she gets pregnant young, she gets married young, she's a child with special needs, she works 2 jobs. There's a lot that Ingrid has to manage. Yeah. And then here's Becky, single, no family, yeah. Secretly flying off and just spending millions of dollars on art.
Right.
But she's always kind of giving back to Ingrid. You know, one of my favorite moments in the book is when she buys this Mary Cassatt painting for yes. Ingrid. Yes. And Ingrid has no idea. Or does she? I mean, that's another question I have.
Wow, I never considered that, Kate. But you're right. Like, so Becky at one point buys this, I mean, a Mary Cassatt, what you would, it's a sketch, but still, I mean, she spends a lot of money to give to Ingrid as a wedding present. And there's a funny moment where Ingrid's like holding it and almost drops it, and Becky's heart stops, and Ingrid says something like, oh, maybe we can hang it here, but actually I think Dave's Led Zeppelin poster is gonna go there instead. And so in this way, I have Becky sort of, you know, giving her the thing that she thinks is most valuable to her friend, who maybe doesn't quite know the value of it other than it's a gift from her dear friend. Yes. But, you know, you were the first person, I think, Kate, who gave me that idea that Ingrid is one of the hearts or the heart of the book. And I love that because, yeah, Becky's a very prickly person. She's not great with relationships. It's not like her forte, but she falls in with Ingrid, and Ingrid doesn't let her get away with a lot of stuff. She kind of calls her out on Becky's sort of rudeness and shortness. And you know, they form this friendship that I think is a pretty strong through line in the novel. And to me, it is one of the hearts of the novel because I think it shows the potential for the real pain that Becky is, you know, perhaps able to give to someone that she loves, even while she doesn't think she is. So for example, Ingrid does have a special needs kid, and she's really devoted to trying to bring a program to the local school for all the kids in the area who need that kind of support. And Becky wants to just pay for private therapy for Ingrid's child, and she does. And, you know, she doesn't understand, like, well, Ingrid, why are you, you know, I don't want to hear about all these other randoms with their kids. Like, you're getting top of the line Cadillac therapy for your child. But of course, Becky doesn't realize that other people don't really think like that. Like, they might have an idea of a community, you know, benefit. And there's a tension there because Becky just desperately loves Ingrid and wants to treat her and wants to give her things. You know, Ingrid doesn't have a lot of money, but she can't really do that without giving away what she's doing. And there's kind of this suspicion, you know, she can't give Ingrid a fancy necklace, for example, without Ingrid being like, what the heck is this? What is this, you know?
The necklace, yes, I agree. I have another question from the chat. I haven't purchased the book yet, but I'm so, all caps, thank you, looking forward to reading it. When I heard the title, I couldn't understand why you would choose to refer the reader immediately to the talented Mr. Ripley. Now, as I'm learning about Becky, did you just want to prompt your reader to be intrigued by that kind of almost psychopathic character? I was also sold on getting the book by the fact that you've included the art world.
Awesome. Yes, let's talk about
the title for a minute. It wasn't our first title.
No, and I was joking with a novelist friend about how, as a writer, you're either, there's like one of two camps. I don't know if you think this too, Kate, but like, I feel like writers either know the title of their book like the moment they start to write it, and it's the same and it's awesome all the way through, or you're like me and you have a file on your computer that's like novel, and you wait and like years go by and you work on this thing and you sell it and it's like a thing and people are asking you about it and you're like, oh, I don't know what it's called yet. So that's me. But if you write a novel about a con artist, you are in conversation with Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley. It is one of the sort of high water marks for writing about a double life in fiction. And so the question is about, like, you know, this kind of like psychopath that Mr. Ripley is, and Tom Ripley. And he does commit murders, and we all know that he's this kind of, you know, he has a very dark, violent side. And while that's not really the case with my character Becky, the reason I named it The Talented Miss Farwell is for a couple of reasons. First is because it does reference the con artist thing, but it flips it and emphasizes her femaleness, right? We have that miss, which is very strong there, and I think does what I wanted to, which is remind us that she's a woman pulling off this crime with all the obstacles that are in her path. And she reflects on those sometimes, you know, can't anyone see what I'm doing? You know, why she just, you know, is sort of outraged that she has to do all this and do it backwards in high heels, or whatever the Ginger Rogers quote is. But the other reason I love the title is because she is thought of that as a talented Miss Farwell by her town. You know, they love her. And in the era she grew up, you know, she was called Miss Farwell. She's an unmarried woman, and that was her title by this conservative town for a long time. So they think of her as that. She uses her talents to take care of the town, to always be there, to help them out, to support them. But she does have these kind of secret other talents too that, you know, I hope is sort of layered in there with the title. So I know we came to it late, but I'm so happy about the title. I do love it.
Me too. And I also think the Miss versus the Mrs. is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
She couldn't have done what she did.
No.
She had been married. Unless he was in on it too, but like that's a whole other separate thing. Again, you look at Ingrid, who's managing so much to keep her family going.
Yes.
And here's Becky, only person she needs to take care of is herself.
I just want to mention that too. Like, one of the things that I think really drew me to the idea of this character is that when we think about women in fiction who lead double lives, I think we're mostly used to reading about women who have like, who sort of create this double life out of their relationships or their, you know, so we might read about like a woman having an affair or a woman, you know, sort of leaving her kids or kind of this tension between her and her family or her relationships. And so what I really wanted to do was to write a novel where the character is as strong and isolated on her own and is passionate about something other than her family. Like she doesn't really have a family. And so this pursuit of art is her passion. It is her life. It takes the place of that family. And so to me, that was like a really kind of interesting and compelling element, maybe something that I hadn't seen a lot before in fiction, and the way I instantly saw who Becky is.
Yep. Yep. No, I really agree with that. And then I would just want to add from the chat, the person who asked the question about Talented Mr. Ripley said, I think Patricia Highsmith would approve. Thank
Let's hope. Let's hope.
I want to ask, moving away from the book for a minute, I want to pull another question from the chat, which is that Peter says, your authorship goes back to 2010. This is probably the first time you're introducing a book without a book tour, or maybe even any live events. For you, does it change the energy and dynamics of getting reactions and perhaps applying it to the next book? We haven't even talked about the next book, so there we go. Or do you prefer the virtual introductions, perhaps requiring not as much travel and preparation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it's, you know, bringing a book out right now is hard and strange. It does feel a little isolating to be doing this in my office, looking at you fine folks on the computer. And one of the things I do love about going on tour is getting to be in bookstores, talk to bookstore owners, talk to libraries, talk to people in person. You know, I think all of us here might identify as a book person, as a reader, and that's my main identification too. So I love to meet other readers and talk books. But, you know, that's what we're doing tonight. And I'm really happy about the way that the book world in particular, I would say, and Kate, maybe you have a thought about this, like we all instantly pivoted and were able to make this work. I mean, my, you know, bookstores, my agent, my editor, my publishing house, my, you know, libraries, like book people were on it with the online world and were able to really kind of support readers and writers right from the beginning. I was going to these book events in March and April. So on the one hand, yeah, it's a loss. I would much rather we were all together in Darien's beautiful auditorium and then we could all go out for a drink afterwards and I could see my parents. But I think that, you know, honestly, this has been just kind of the next best thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there's a push-pull with it, which is that for me, the best days I have as an editor are the days when I'm editing books, which is when everything is kind of, when my schedule is sort of like working smoothly, it's Fridays. You know, Fridays I don't go into the office and I'm at home and I'm just working with text. And those are that's the heart blood for me of being an editor, because I like that a lot. Publishing a book is about so many other things, right? The book has to be great at the end of the day, right? But then there's many other things that you have to be able to do in order to publish. You have to write a copy, you have to get a good cover, you have to get your sales force on board, you have to have a writer who's gonna go out on tour. You know, there are a lot of pieces about publishing a book that have almost nothing to do with the work that Emily, you and I do on the book itself. So in some ways, being in isolation is great because there's theoretically more time to sort of devote to the books. But then the other piece of working in publishing and being a book person, and people who work in libraries feel this way too, and people who work in bookstores feel this way too, is that just being able to talk to so many people about books that you've read, right? It's like, for me, the greatest pleasure is immersing myself in a wonderful book. And the next greatest pleasure is finishing it and having a conversation with someone else about that book.
Absolutely.
So the conversation part is the part that has moved virtually. It's great that we've been able to do as much of it virtually as we have. I think you were right that the pivot was pretty instant and pretty amazing, and we're learning new things every week. It's like a constantly changing landscape. But I do miss being in person, you know. I do miss going to book club. I do miss going to book event. There is a better energy in the room when your writer is up there in conversation, and the audience, you're getting, you know, direct reactions from live. So I think it's a mix. I mean, I'm grateful that books are still selling as well as they are, which is well.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to, speaking of booksellers, Rosanna from Barrett Bookstore, hi Rosanna,
Hey.
asks, Emily, do you read fiction while you are writing your own fiction? And what have you read recently that you've liked?
Awesome. Well, that's a great question, and yay for Barrett Bookstore. So thank you, Rosanna, for being here. I love your store. I was just in there. I went out to Darien, I think it was in August. So we were just there, my family and my mom and I. And yes, so the way I always answer this question, I know there are those writers that always say, like, I don't read fiction when I'm writing because it might, I don't know, counteract what I'm trying to do or get in my head. But here's my take on that. I would toss writing to the curb in a second if it if it ever came in competition with my reading. Like, I am definitely a reader first and foremost. I am only a writer because of being a reader. And I couldn't bear to stop reading fiction for like a millisecond. So I'm always reading, and I'm tearing through books now more than ever. So let's talk about what I've been loving. I absolutely loved Margot Livsy's new novel, The Boy in the Field. Margot Livsy is just a wonderful master, and this book is a compressed gem of a book. It's one of those where it's short and powerful, like it's deceptively simple, but you finish it and you're thinking about it for days afterwards. Right now I'm reading Sue Miller's new novel, Monogamy. I mean, talk about a pro. Like, Sue Miller is just, you go to her, and all the stuff I said about Becky not really being into relationships, like, you go to Sue Miller for relationships, and she just, absolutely is beautiful about time and family and love. And the next thing I'm reading is the new N.K. Jemisin book. I guess it's not brand new, but it's the one about New York. I'm looking for it on my shelf. Oh yeah, hang on. I'm gonna grab a couple. Okay, here I am with all some books, but I really want to read The City We Became. I know this is backwards for you, but it's a book about New York, which is my hometown originally. And I've been fascinated by this author. I also just got the new Susanna Clark book, Piranesi. She wrote Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which I didn't read, but my husband is obsessed with and tried to get me to read. I think it's like grown-up Harry Potter. Probably you guys all know about this, but she had a profile in the New Yorker recently that was fascinating. And then the last one I'll say is Allie Smith's new novel, Summer, which is the end of the quartet. She wrote all the seasons, spring, summer, fall, winter. And I just think she is a master and fascinating and experimental and interesting. And apparently she writes about the pandemic in this novel, which I think is going to be kind of very interesting to start seeing what fiction is going to do with this moment in time. So I trust her and I love her. So I'm very interested to see what her take is on that in this novel. I'd love to hear what you guys are reading too. So if you have any suggestions, drop them in the chat, people, because
Rosanna says, thank you.
Hey, we all need
Peter,
books.
Peter, who asked the previous question about being on tour, also says thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, everybody.
Everybody. Okay, another question. How much time do you dedicate to writing/rewriting on a daily or weekly basis? And are you able to live entirely on your writing revenue, or do you have side work as well?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I definitely don't live entirely on my writing. I also work part-time as a proofreader for a pharmaceutical company that's based out here in Illinois. So when I'm not talking to you fine folks, I'm like, I don't know, proofreading syringe droplet milligrams and, various other kinds of IV, technical stuff, which is great, to be honest. I used to be a teacher, and I've taught writing for many, many years. I may also do it again. I've taught writing at the college level, in community centers, to younger students. But I found after a while that teaching writing was really kind of a drain on my own writing energy, and finding work that is, well, first of all, it pays better, so that's good. And second of all, it doesn't tap my writing battery at all to, like, you know, proofread long columns of numbers about how much is in this various syringe versus that various syringe. Like, I can come to my work and feel pretty fresh. So that's what I do for a day job. But I also take care of my 2 teenagers. We have a senior in high school and a freshman in high school. And they're doing high school from their rooms in the apartment. So that's taken up quite a bit of all of our time these days. And in terms of writing, like when I am actually writing a draft, I will probably work for at least maybe like between 1 and 3 hours a day of, you know, putting words out there and moving the draft forward. But I'm not always writing a first draft. Sometimes I might be taking notes, getting ready for a book. And other times after the draft is written, I might be working with Kate on edits, and she will give me her notes. And then the time's a little different. But I would say if I'm powering ahead, working on the draft of a novel, I try to write between 1 and 3 hours a day. So it's totally doable for, you know, parents, people with jobs. Yeah.
Great. I'm going to thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the questions.
I want to get back to Becky a little bit. And Becky never gets married.
No.
She never has any real boyfriends or intimate relationships aside from Ingrid. But she does actually have a very close relationship with the new mayor of the town, Ken.
Yes.
And for me, the Ken-Becky relationship was one of the most interesting, because he comes in when she's well into the crime. And it's this moment where she sort of has to figure out, am I going to continue to be able to get away with this, or do I need to sort of put as much back as I can and get out? And she continues.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Spoiler alert.
That's all
I mean,
right.
she continues all the way through. So, but she has this close relationship with Ken, and Ken is handsome, and people call him the Mayor Ken doll. I mean, so in some ways and he's married. And he has kids. I mean, he's not available, but in a lot of ways he's a real catch. So can you talk about that relationship a little bit?
Yes, and the thing I always think of with Ken is the joke Ingrid makes about him is she compares him to Robert Redford's character in The Way We Were, and he writes that novel that's like, you know, about himself, like, you know, oh my gosh, my mom is upstairs just freaking out because I'm talking. This is her favorite movie, and we've watched it together many times. But there's a line like, you know, he was like the country he lived in, things, you know, everything always came too easily to him. And so he's like this golden boy, is the way Ingrid sees him. She's got his number. She knows, you know, he's got his eye on Becky. And sure enough, he enters this town, and he's young, and he's handsome, and he's energetic, and he wants to turn the town around. It's been failing for a long time, mostly because of Becky. So it's very conflicted for Becky, because on the one hand, she's been frustrated and angry that the town is failing. She doesn't want her town to fail. And in a weird way, she's angry that no one has caught her yet, because she is like, how can this be possible? But then again, she's worried that someone will catch her. So she's worried that Ken will catch her. But he also kind of reminds her of herself, because he's devoted and passionate to helping this small town turn itself around. He's got all these ideas. He's got all this energy. So in a way, they're like this super duo, this like super power duo of helping Pierson, you know, get into the black financially. But she also knows that he's smart, and she has to be careful now about how she's going to continue what she calls her activity, even while she works with him. And it's a very fine line. It's a little bit complicated how she tries to manage both of those things. Have this relationship with him about like, okay, we're going to do this, save the town. And there's some sparks that kind of are going on between them. And her own private situation, which is, you know, how she continues to, you know, go forward with her passion for collecting art. So yeah, Ken is kind of like on the crux there.
Nice reminder, 10 minutes left. If anyone has any final questions, like put them in the chat.
Yeah, I want to hear questions. I want to hear from people. Thank you guys for being here. This is so great.
It's really fun. Here's my question. I've read a few pieces lately that have said we're in a moment of con artists. You know, we had the Fire Festival, we have Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, we have Anna Delvey, right, the fake heiress. Right. So it seems like in the past few years, there has just been like con artists after con artists after con artists. I don't think this is a moment. I think there have always been con artists, right? But why do you think there are so many right now? And do you have a favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. And it's funny you mentioned the
future, if you know anyone who's planning one.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, I believe is her name Elizabeth Holmes, the woman from, and it's Theranos? Is that the name of the company? Because I always say it wrong. I always say Thanatos or something, which I think is like the Marvel, you know, like the bad guy in the Marvel movie that I watched with my teenagers. And anyway, I'm always getting that wrong. But yeah, it seems like we're in a moment where con artists are coming to the fore. But as you've said, like we've always had them around. And there have been many instances in the news and in the public awareness of people who pass themselves off to be Rockefellers, for example. That's like a common thing because the family is now so extended. Lots of people pretend to be a Rockefeller. And we've had it in business, right? Bernie Madoff, Elizabeth Holmes, and we've had it in the society world, like with Anna Delvey, maybe Caroline Calloway, the like influencer.
I love Caroline Calloway.
I know, that was a big, and then the Fire Festival, right? So, I mean, probably the internet is part of it, which gives people both the ability to create this false profile, this false history, this false front, and it gives people a way of uncovering, you know, devious activity. There are people who can track down and, I don't know, you know, like, as a hive, you know, kind of find the truth about someone. So I definitely think the internet is there. But I also think that, like, here's my take is, I think we all are understanding of the basic idea of living a double life, right? That we are aware that we present different faces in different communities or in different circles. Maybe, I mean, I know this in my own life, you know, in my home community, I'm often like the mom who's taking her kids to school, and that's who I am to many people in the town, and it's not in my neighborhood, and that's not false. I am that person, and nothing more to, in for many, many years to my neighbors. To you guys, I'm a writer, and we're talking about books, and we're deep into this conversation. So in a sense, I think that like we all have that understanding of what it means to have different lives or different faces to different people. And so I think we're actually really attracted to the idea of con artists and of people who live double lives, because they're really just doing to an extreme what we all do to some extent in our own daily lives. And it's fun to read about people getting away with stuff that we're not getting away with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. People who aren't scared. I would be so scared all the time, right?
All the time. All the time. Oh my gosh.
And Becky's scared, but she doesn't. The drive is stronger than the fear.
Yeah, but just barely. It's a tension there.
Yeah, just barely. Just barely. All right, I'm going to ask one last question. This is from your mom, so deserves the last question. Betsy Gray, thank you. Are you writing anything right now?
Thanks, Mom. Hi, Mom. Yes and no. And this is really funny to talk to Kate about this, right? Yeah, Kate, we haven't even had a conversation. But like a few months ago in the quarantine, I remember thinking, like, I really want to be writing a new novel. But I didn't want to be writing just like any new novel. I wanted to design a novel that would help me during the quarantine. And so I was like, kind of messing around in my head. I was like, I wish I was writing a novel that was, and I had these like characteristics I wanted, like really fun, maybe sort of sexy, maybe sort of like in a sort of exotic place, and not about anything dark or, you know, heavy or politics based. So it's weird. I'm messing around with a new project and it's so fun and delightful, and it's really like a gift I gave myself. It's like an exercise program that I designed for like what I needed right now. And I have no idea if it'll ever see the outside of my computer. It might just be what I'm like doing to help myself during this time, but I can say that it's been so good to have something other than Miss Farwell to, you know, be excited about. So that's been kind of fun.
Well, can I tell you the most pleasure I got during the whole pandemic? I mean, it's still going on, right? But for 5 months, I fled the city to New Hampshire. I have 2 young children and I grew up in New Hampshire. And so my husband and I were up there with our kids and sporadic childcare from my parents. And I read 2 books while I was there. I read Lost Children Archive, which is
God,
incredible. It's an incredible book. I mean, just like on a craft and a thinking, the ideas in that book are so big and so well explained and so complicated and so moving. I mean, I did like that book. I can't say enough about it.
I have to read it. This is like Valeria Luiselli.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And but it took me 2 months to read that book because it's a very brainy book. And I was reading it sort of like in the 10 minutes between when I stopped working at night and when I fell asleep. So it took me a long time. Right after I finished that book, I read the very first J.D. Robb mystery, the first Eve Dallas. I don't know when Nora Roberts started writing those books, like 1988 or something. And I read it in one weekend while my kids played in an inflatable pool. And I just sat there and like tore through this like mystery.
I love it.
I thought, wow, that was really fun. I understand why there are 50 books in that series.
I'm picturing you in like this tiny pool with like your kids and like you're just like sitting there and like
I wasn't in the pool. They were in the pool. And I was like in a lawn chair off to the side.
I love it.
And yeah, so that was my high low. But I agree. Like we did need in these few months, we did need books that were not going to challenge us in certain. I mean, we also needed books that would challenge us. There was a lot of other stuff too, but like the pleasure of escapist fiction is something that I personally understood and professionally saw in the months from March to August.
Absolutely.
This was so much fun for me.
This was so fun, Kate. Thank you. This is like
all the time.
This is such a fun treat to get to talk to you with all these smart readers hanging out with us. I just loved it. Thank you, Darien Library.
Yes, and thank you everyone who asked a question. It was great. These were great questions. And anything else that we need to say?
I don't think so. Keep reading, everybody. This is really fun, and I know you guys have a great access to books there. So hopefully I'll get to see you at some point in person, you know, down the road. And thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Emily and Kate. A patron actually just shared that this was the best author talk that they had experienced throughout the whole pandemic. So Thank you for this lovely evening. And thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. We're happy that you're here. Hopefully one day we'll see you again in the future. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.